Hi, and welcome to Supernatural by Design. Today, we'll be taking an in-depth look at Noah's flood and its deep and prophetic connection to the number 11. Noah's flood is one of my most favorite Bible stories, and what makes it interesting is not only is it one of the oldest stories in the Bible, but it's also one of the oldest in the world. In fact, over 100 ancient cultures have a similar story of an ancient, massive, and devastating flood. You see, the stories of a great ancient flood pervade the mythologies of hundreds of cultures. Westerners might be familiar with the story of Noah told in the Old Testament book of Genesis, but a great flood is reported in folklore from cultures around the world, from the Middle East to the Americas, India, China, and Southern Asia, just to name a few. And because so many cultures share this ancient story, is there a truth rooted in this supposed myth? We will discover that Noah's flood shares another unique connection to major world events throughout history, and that these events, as well as Noah's flood, all revolve around the number 11. And because Jesus stated that it would be exactly like the days of Noah before the second coming, we will uncover the mystery behind the 11:11 phenomenon. Because what if I told you that we are living in the end times as detailed in the book of Revelation, and that this connection is tied to Noah's flood and the number 11. However, to see this connection, we need a quick foundation on the number 11, so let's begin. The number 11 can be found in many historical dates, from ancient biblical times to even more modern times. In fact, you could say that all dates that add to 11 is something that God is doing behind the scenes, and this characteristic is found in Israel's history as well as the church. Hence why the birth of our nation was founded on 7/4 of 1776, because we were founded as a Christian nation. However, in order to see this connection between dates and 11, let's start with Moses and the Exodus. Because if we fast forward to the 10th plague that hit Egypt, it is here that we get the first Passover celebration in Israel's history, because a death angel would pass over the homes that had a red cross on the door, and the red cross was marked in lamb's blood. Well, where did they get the lamb from? Well, Moses was told by God to get a virgin lamb on the 10th day of the first month, and 10 plus 1 equals 11. And it's this idea of adding the day plus the month that we see the connection between 11. Interestingly enough, the lamb is a foreshadow of Christ, from his entry into Jerusalem, represented as the lamb, his death 4 days later as that of the lambs, and the resurrection of Christ, which is represented as a celebration 3 days later. So 110 not only represents Passover for the Jew, but that it could be considered the first Palm Sunday, highlighting the fact that 110 is synonymous with the nation of Israel as well as the church, because both are tied to unique dates relative to the number 11. Next, we have 110, when Israel crossed the Jordan River, which is the first time that Israel enters the Promised Land. And interestingly enough, this idea of Israel entering the Promised Land was seen again on 6/5 of 1967, because Israel recaptured the city of Jerusalem for the first time since the time of Jesus. In addition, 6/5 of 1967 is even prophesied in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 8. Ezekiel's vision of the nation of Israel being regathered in the end times was given on 6/5. And interestingly enough, the vision is similar to the 6-day war, in that the vision ends in chapter 11, with Israel regathered in Jerusalem, whereas the 6-day war also ended on the 11th day of June. And this event is surrounded by 4 total lunar eclipses in a row, as well as a total solar eclipse on 11/2, or 11/11. So as you can see, 11 plays a major role in monumental dates in Jewish history. Now let's take a look at some American or Christian dates. 7/4, 1776, the Declaration of Independence. Then 9/11 of 2001 was the attack on the World Trade Center. And lastly, 8/21 of 2017 was the total solar eclipse that went across America. So as you can see, all these dates share a unique connection to the number 11, whether it's in Israel's history or that of the church. However, is this the same as in Noah's story? We will see that Noah's flood is littered with the number 11, from the very start to the end of Noah's flood in astonishing ways. So, come, let's explore a little further. In Noah's flood, we will see, as in other videos, that the number 11 plays a unique role in major events around the world. And the story of Noah is no different. And to demonstrate this, we will use this timeline, starting at 1, representing the year in which the flood began, which is referenced in the Bible as Noah's first day, first month, and 600th year of his life. Now the flood itself starts in chapter 7, verse 11. And if you notice, the flood first off starts in verse 11, on the date of 217. And what makes 217 unique? Well, in ancient times, many calendars were defined as 360 days for one calendar year. And why is this important? Because 217, when you take the first month, you would have 30 days, and the second month would be 17 days. So, 30 days plus 17 days equals 47 days, or the 47th day of the year. And 4 plus 7 equals 11. And already, we have 2 instances of the number 11 just within the start of the flood, or a double 11, making it similar to an 11:11, with the verse number and the day of the year that it begins. So if we continue from 217, it rained for 40 days and 40 nights, covering the whole earth until it reached a max height. Well, this time period is given as 150 days later and lands on 717. And why is this important? Well, if we know the length of time is 150 days, then 150 days minus the 40 days of rain equals 110 days. Our next date is given on 10/1, which is an 11, and is 74 days from the date of 717, and 7 plus 4 equals 11. And here again, we have a double 11, with the date and the duration making it 11/11. And our next date given is on 1/1, which is 90 days from 10/1. Our final date given is on 2/27, which is an 11, and 2/27 is 56 days from 1/1, a double 11 again, or an 11/11. And 2/27 culminates the end of the flood, and Noah exits the boat. However, to top it off, 217 of 600 to 227 of 601 when Noah exits the ark, and including the end date, is 371 days, and 3 plus 7 plus 1 equals 11. Another interesting fact with regards to the number 11 is that if you count from Adam to Noah's generation, it is 10 generations. And since Noah's sons would be the next generation to repopulate the earth, it would make the sons the 11th generation from Adam. So the number 11 is literally everywhere in the ancient story of Noah's flood. From the dates, in fact, 3 out of the 5 dates listed are 11s, to even the durations between the dates, and ultimately the duration of the entire event. In addition, 11:11 continues to appear in the timeline. Is there a reason for that? And what does 11:11 mean? Because we know that Noah's flood follows the date pattern that matches the examples from history. But what can be said about 11:11? Is it possibly pointing to end-time prophecy? So come, let's unravel the mystery behind 11:11. To first connect Noah's flood to end-time prophecy, we must start in Matthew chapter 24, because it is here that we find that connection. When Jesus was asked what the signs would be of his second coming, he stated that it would be exactly like the times of Noah. Although this means a couple of different things relating to end-time prophecy, we will cover that in a separate video, because we are only comparing the 11 date aspect of this particular verse. So what can be said about the days of Noah? Well, how about the number 11, as we just discovered? And in a previous video on Stranger Things, I mentioned that the number 11 represents the physical and spiritual dimensions. And so, if 111 represents a physical and spiritual world, then 2 11s would represent 2 physical and spiritual worlds, to making 11:11 mean a transition from one physical and spiritual world to another. For example, this 11 would represent the world before the flood, and this 11 would represent the world after the flood. And why is this important? Because it is mentioned that the current physical and spiritual world in end-time prophecy will burn up, and a new heaven and a new earth will be created, highlighting 1111, representing going from something old to brand new. With that said, I fully believe that right at this very moment, we are going through a transition period, symbolized as 1111, and that the reason why so many people are encountering this phenomenon of seeing 1111 is because 1111 is an alert message that we're in the transition. And from what I've discovered, many people experience this on a regular basis, like on a clock. And I don't think that this is coincidental, because it challenges things in life that they're not random, and suggesting that everything has a reason. And so is this idea pointing to a larger reality behind this one? And if so, are we marching into the end times as predicted in the book of Revelation? I believe that 1111 is God calling people to Him to be saved and delivered into this new physical and spiritual world that is to come, which is why this phenomenon happens to believers as well as non-believers, to question or affirm that there is something bigger going on behind the scenes, and that bigger is God. However, interestingly enough, 1111 can be written as 11 plus 11, or 22, and 22 is how many chapters are in the book of Revelation. However, with that said, how do we know when this transition begun? Well, it's my personal opinion that I believe it started on 9/11 of 2001, because 9/11 is very similar in the details relative to the number 11, just as Noah's flood was. And if you haven't seen my 9/11 video, then I highly suggest that you do for some additional background information, because when compared both events side by side, you will see that the dates, the duration between dates, even the day that Noah's flood started, are all similar to 9/11. So if we put Noah's flood to the left and 9/11 to the right, the dates for Noah's flood can be summed up as 3 out of 5 dates were dates that added to 11, just like 9/11 itself adds to 11. The duration between the dates of Noah's flood, we have a 110 or 47, 56 days. Whereas 9/11 had a total lunar eclipse 245 days from 9/11, and a total solar eclipse that landed on the summer solstice was 83 days from 9/11. And lastly, the day of the event, remember Noah's flood was on 2/17, which was the 47th day of the year, similar to 9/11 because it was the 254th day of the year. And interesting to note that the commencement of both of these events are tied to the number 11, because in Genesis, the flood starts in verse 11, and on 9/11, Flight 11 was the first plane to attack. So as you can see, there are a lot of similarities between both events relative to the number 11. However, what ties 9/11 as the start to end time events? Well, this can be found in the constellation of Gemini, because both the total and solar eclipses of 2001 occurred in that constellation. However, we will go through all that in an in-depth study into this constellation in another video, because the story behind this constellation tells of 2 sets of twins, and that all 4 were superior horsemen. In fact, their horses were considered the 4 immortal horses of the Discovery, and these horsemen are depicted with the same imagery as that of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, like in Revelation chapter 6. Could this all be linked to why 4 planes attacked on 9/11? And that possibly each plane symbolizes one of these 4 horsemen? And so we will discover this in that particular video. So today, we have learned that Noah's flood is similar to other world-changing events in history by its repetition in the use of a number 11, as well as Jesus tying his second coming to being exactly like the days of Noah. And lastly, that 9/11 is very similar to Noah's flood with regards to the number 11, pointing to end-time prophecy, and that this transition is captured in the 1111 phenomenon. I truly hope that this video has helped you better understand Noah's flood and its prophetic connection to the number 11. In fact, it's why I argue that Noah's flood is supernatural by design. Thank you for tuning in, and please remember to hit the like, subscribe, and share button. And be sure to hit the notification bell for new and exciting videos to come. Thank you and have a blessed day.